Good morning, students. Welcome to the Google class. It's nice to see you all here. It's a new method of teaching and learning. Well, students, before I could begin my class, I have few instructions for you. As usual, we'll be giving you uh, the sheet begin with an end in mind, where you have the prior knowledge, followed by the summary and few question answers. This is for you to understand the poem before we could start it. The instruction that I would like to give you are all the work should be in journal, and you should follow this very strictly. Don't write in paper, but see to that all the notes are written in the journal only. And the poem is explained in the form of a PPT presentation, where you'll be able to understand and analyze the poem. The poem is explained to you, and even I will be further explaining it to you, where you have a full understanding of the poem and the poet's perspective and what he would like to convey through the poem, The Wild Swans at Cool. So, let's begin our class. So, before we could understand and know about the poem, students, it's very important for us to know about what the author wanted to convey in the poem The Wild Swans at Combe. The Wild Swans at Combe is written by William Butler Yeats. Yeats wrote this poem in 1916 when he was 51 years of age. Coole Park is in Galway, was the home of Lady Augusta Gregory, Yeats' friend and patron. You may ask me, what's the meaning of patron? Patron is a wealthy or an influential supporter of an artist or a writer. In the poem, he reflects on how his life has changed since he was a younger man and walked with a lighter tread. In reality, Yeats had not been carefree in his youth, but for the purpose of this poem, we must suspend the disbelief and take him at his word. In 1916, this is his background. Yeats' loved Maud Goney was widowed. Her husband, Major John McBride, had been executed by the British for his past in the Easter Rising. Maud Goney went to France to work as a nurse with the war wounded, and Yeats followed her to propose marriage once again. Once again, she refused. In 1917, Yeats married Georgina Heidi Lees and moved into Tour Ballylee, a house near Coole Park. Yeats begins his poem by describing the beauty of Coole Park in autumn. Details such as brimming water, dry woodland paths bring this peaceful scene to life. It's mentioned in the first line of the poem. The brimming water of the lake contrasts with the dry paths. It is as if the lake and its occupants represents life and growth, while we can see the land where each stand is barren. Autumn is linked with slowing down and dying. And you can also see that the words are there where the swans are counted, and Yeats count the swans and says that there are 9 and 50 of them. Swans mate for life, so why is there an odd number? You may ask me this question, students. Well, is one of them like Yeats alone? The repeated M, S, and I sounds in this stanza emphasizes the peace and quiet. So we can see that the tone of the stanza is quite detached. The descriptions are given without any obvious emotions. Coming to the second stanza, you can see that Yeats became far more personal, as he recalls that it is 19 years since he first counted these swans. Although logic tells us that these are unlikely to be the same swans, we suspend disbelief and accept that this is just an artistic construct. Suddenly, before Yeats, uh, finish is counting all the swans rise into the air. There are they run on lines, suggest moments, and reflects the swans fight. The onomatopoeia is given there clamoring, uh, which you can see that captures the clapping and beating of the swan's wing. The form ring, which is a symbol of, and perhaps that reminds Yeats that while he might change, the swans still remain the same. We can also see that the poet reflects how everything in life has changed since he first looked at the swans on the lake. All is changed. He is not as young, as carefree as he was when. The line says, lighter trod. His heart is sore as he thinks of the loss of his youth and of his failed romances. The description of swans' wings in flight, the bell beat of their wings, is particularly effective here in the lines of the poem. The alliteration is bell beat, where you can see how they captures the steady beat of the birds. The swan has huge wings as they fly above his head. When we further look at the lines, we can see that how Yeats wondering where the swans will go next, how they will take delight in men's eyes. Perhaps he means that they are unchanged and will continue to bring pleasure to others who stand, as he does now watch them glide one more on the still water. We have to understand here, students, that the poem is set in autumn and winter. That will be inevitably follow for the poet. The swans seem untouched by everything and will continue to drift the still waters. He may be thinking of his creative life or his love life, or both, when he reflects on the changes that time has wrought. The swans are unchanging, content, and immortal. He is none of these things. Now let's look further in the PPT presentation for a deeper understanding of the poem and what the poet wanted to convey through the poem The Wild Swans at Cool. The Wild Swans at Cool, written by William Butler Yeats. The setting is Cool Park, Ireland. Cool Park was a retreat to Yeats. The place belonged to Lady Gregory, an important name in Irish literary revolution. The poem is a regular lyric written 5 stanza, each consists of 6 lines verse. You must be wondering why 59 swans. The poem talks about the sadness and the poet, a melancholic man. W.B. Yeats is wandering through grounds of park when he sees a flock of swans floating on a lake. The sight of the swans reminds W.B. Yeats the first visited Cool Lake 19 years. All of a sudden he feels very old. He thinks about how much life has changed in 19 years. The Wild Swans at Cool is a beautiful poem. The poet in this poem wonders about time, morality, and pleasure of the company. William Butler Yeats was born in 1865 in Dublin. He was the greatest writer of the 20th century. Although he spent his childhood in London, Yeats' poem reflects his deep emotional attachment to his native land, Ireland. He was a staunch supporter of Irish nationalism. He devoted himself to native subjects, writing poems, play, short stories, and novels with Irish characters and setting. Many of his writings reveal a dreamlike nostalgia. He was a modernist who experimented with free verse and a symbolist who used elusive images and symbol of his career. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1923. He laments the loss of the youth. The whole poem talks about it. The Why Swan Set Cool is a poem that deals with the aging process of William Butler Yeats. It is a deeply personal poem that explores the cycle of life through nature. The poem is set in Cool Park in autumn, which is located on Lady Gregory's estate. The poet is on or near the shore of a large pond and is observing the swans. It has been 19 years since the first time he came to this place, and it is on this visit that he begins to realize that he is getting older. The poet parallels nature in the poem as it represents his present state, while in the poem there is a contrast between the poet and the swan because the swan is used as a metaphor for the poet's youth. The poem is written in iambic pentameter and consists of 5 pairs of stressed and unstressed syllables. Before we could start the poem, I'll read the poem stanza 1. The trees are in their autumn beauty, the woodland paths are dry. Under the October twilight the water mirrors a still sky. Upon the brimming water, among the stones are 9 and 59 swans. First line of the poem gives a beautiful description of Cole Park. The first line of the poem tells that the trees are in their autumn beauty. This presents the reader with a sense of maturity. The trees are ready to complete their yearly cycle by losing their leaves. A vision of bare branches come to mind after reading this line. The leaves of the trees are shed. What you can see are protected the skeleton of the trees. Like the trees, the poet also feels he will lose something as well as when his own cycle nears completion. We can see that in this poem, the leaves can also be associated with the poet's youth. Like a tree, without its leaves, man without his youth is vulnerable. The poet will lose his youth, and in his old age, he too will be exposed to the harshness of the world. The use of the line which says, the woodland paths are dry, in line 2, reinforces the first line of the poem by presenting the reader with an image of bride. We can see the trees are in their autumn beauty. The line which says, upon the brimming water among the stones are 9 and 50 swans. This is very prominent in the poem. He compares himself to the environment around him. This is related to Yeats' own life. Swan is a symbol for the woman he loves. Poem is a lamentation for his unrequited love. Thank you, students. That was the end of the presentation.